Side 2 begins with Sweet Bird of Truth, a sweet title for a song that's anything but sweet. And I honestly say that in, strangely enough, a good way, because this song is quite the track. It starts with this spoken conversation between these military jet pilots who are talking about some mission where they have to hunt down a target or something. Sounding as though as if it's being played through some old radio or something. I think because of that, there's a sense of realism to it, as if we're kind of listening on into and eavesdropping on an actual like audio dialogue from some kind of military army mission or something. And then the music starts properly with these suspenseful Bond-esque horns and these gritty guitar riffs, and well as this chanting of Arabia, Arabia, quite distant and faint, but still noticeable enough once you manage to catch it. Then Matt Johnson comes in singing from the point of view of a particular soldier who's barely awake and is aboard this military transport aeroplane that's flying over the Persian Gulf. And then the chorus comes along with the captain calling and warning how the plane is going down, and he warns us all to hang on tight with all hands on deck and everything. And then Matt goes on to recall how he loses all sense of morality. He doesn't really know what's wrong or right anymore. And how he never even used to be a religious person, but at this moment, as he rushes into the battlefield, he prays that God is with us when we, well, die in the battlefield. It's a very dark, grim, and as well as very ambiguous take on the kind of fears and paranoias that were kind of going on in the 80s. Keep in mind, around this time, the bombing of Libya was quite recent back then, around 86. So it goes to show how when people have access to strong militaries and warfare and power, it can raise some concerns from many innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. So anyone who's kind of grown up with these kind of concerns back in the 80s during the times of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher would definitely relate to something like this. I wouldn't say it's exactly inspired by Libya bombing, since Libya is in North Africa and not in the Middle East, kind of. But the similarities and kind of parallels is still in some ways there, even if it's not entirely intentional. It's still a great gritty song in both musically and lyrically. It's both a product of its time and is in some way prophesizing of what we'd be like to this day and age. Next is Slow Train to Dawn. Much brighter and quicker compared to the previous track, but still just as mature in some way nonetheless. Featuring some duet vocals by Nina Cherry, who many would know as the female singer from 7 Seconds, who sang alongside Yusso Nedor, I'm probably butchering that name wrong, as well as Kids with Guns by Gorillaz. The song itself deals with a struggling relationship, one infected by dishonesty, indifference, neglect, and even possibly addiction as well. They're too tense to be tender to one another, yet too weak to be true to each other. They compare this downfall to a slow, never-ending train that goes on to the point of torture and agony. And the music itself has this carefree mood to it as some form of contrast. And the drums and guitars in it seem to have this kind of train-like rhythm to them. I guess kind of keeping up with that slow train motif. then the song kind of closes out with this sweet and active brass horn kind of bit. I guess kind of like a solo, but it kind of sounds like there are multiple horns, and then it all eventually fades out onto an ambiguous note. So you never exactly know if they fixed the relationship or just ultimately broken up. It's left a mystery, which I still kind of like, since sometimes it can be uncertain on where any relationship will go, be they positive or negative. It could end goodly or for the better, or it could end badly as inevitable. But it still kind of plays in that kind of realism. Sometimes relationships aren't exactly as idealized and as romantic as we may have been led on or we may have convinced ourselves. And this song kind of does well in trying to embody that in some way or another, while not trying to be so one-sided about it. Slow Train to Dawn is a quick and dusky song, and I just love it for that. After that is Twilight of a Champion. Much like with the Twilight song from ELO's Time album, this ain't about an alicorn princess of friendship, nor is it about some veggie vampires and werewolves fighting over some blank slate human. Oh no. This is instead a cautionary tale on the abuse of capitalist power and seeking out desires and fortunes by selling out and compromising one's own sense of ethics. We first hear the sounds of car horns and traffics, kind of bringing us into this clustery, almost claustrophobic urban area, before we're then kind of brought in by Matt's whispery vocals and the almost sinister sounding brass horns and double bass. Then he kind of goes on to sing about, from the point of view of this person who's kind of in this near dystopian place without even noticing or even having some awareness of it, and kind of trying to live by the laws of the jungles, the survival of the fittest and all that, kind of reaching up to the top through, not through earning or working hard, but rather through cheating and deceit. And once he does reach the top, once he has all that power, he suddenly feels this sense of emptiness. All the hope, hunger, and frustration and desire, it almost feels all for naught. It doesn't really feel earned, which in some ways kind of true and possibly relevant to this day and age, as it has always been ever since. So, in a way, it's a kind of a tragedy on the ultimate downfall of those in power who just only seek it out just to make themselves on top, but in the end, they're just as human as anyone else. We're not perfect, and we're always prone to our deepest and darkest desires, and of course, if we're not careful, if we don't think twice and reflect and really think hard about it, it could lead to our downfall. It could lead us down places we never really wanted to go. So, this champion is in his twilight moments, these dark ending, inevitable end time moments for him that will possibly ultimately lead to what is implied to be a suicide, as implied by one of the lyrics by the end of the song. So it is a very, very dark song with some very grim undertones if you really think about it. And so the album concludes with the 7-minute finale, The Mercy Beat, with some clever wordplay on the Mercy Beat from Liverpool. This is a bloody good and even fitting song to go out on. This tells of a man who seems to suffer from some kind of insomnia, so he kind of leaves home late at night. with some high winds blowing and stars shining bright, he heads down to these docks or bay and sorts to just feel the cool power of the waves, possibly willing to let himself drown in it even. And when he calls upon an angel for some kind of inspiration, a demon ultimately comes along and offers him a drink. And there's even a bit of a callback to Slow Train to Dawn with the repeated line of just another Western guy with desires that I couldn't satisfy, or something like that. And so could this be about the same person as that song, or could this whole album be about this one person's perspective on the world around him as well as internally his own conflicts? Who knows? It's very likely. And essentially, it's about a man's battles with his inner demons, his alcoholism and just addiction in general. And the music itself kind of goes along with it, having this eerie, sinister yet somewhat almost poppy approach. It's another one you'd probably have to listen for yourself to actually really feel the vibe for it. And ultimately, just when you thought it fades out and would end the album there, it concludes proper with this kind of repeating, distorted like guitar or synth just going on and on a bit for a couple of more seconds, like 10-ish or so, before fading out again. It is essentially a last note nightmare. And honestly, that's how I can sum up There's Infected. It's an audio nightmare. And I say that in a good way. It's essentially a man's perspective on the world around him, the external and internal conflicts, and how they kind of connect and affect each other in some way or another. Some focus on the overall politics like Heartland and other songs like, shall I say, Sweet Bird of Truth, as well as internal conflicts, as well as such as Slow Train to Dawn and Twilight of a Champion, and even Out of the Blue. And across it, there's this dark, gritty mood to it. It's probably not one you probably want to listen to on a daily basis if you're into more hopeful, more brighter music. But if you like darker music, if you like music that has a more political edge to it, but is still more subtle and ambiguous and uses some clever allegories, I say give this album a pick up. This is, if you like a better term, is a contagious album with themes that kind of in some way stick relevant to this very day, if a lot of the political climates are anything to go by. So if you like old 80s synth punky bands as well as songs that have a more political edge, I say give yourself a challenge and check out this album. It is an infectious album, and pardon the pun, it will infect you with its love. Next time though, we take a look at one last album from the 80s, and this time we salute to those who are about to rock.